right, continuing on with the TNCC Library Open Genealogy Lab Outstanding Guest Speaker Series, today we are pleased to present John Woodward. John was born and raised among the mountains and plains of Wyoming. He has spent most of his professional career improving the state's historical and cultural landscape. He began his professional studies at the University of Wyoming, graduating in 2008 with a baccalaureate degree in history and anthropology. John went on to earn his master's in history from the UW in 2010. He subsequently earned a second master's degree in museum studies from the University of Oklahoma in 2019. John began his museum career in 2008 as a student employee at the University of Wyoming Archaeological Repository. After graduate school, he began working in small historical museums across Wyoming and Nebraska. In 2018, he accepted a position with the Wyoming Military Department to manage its historical museums. His interest in history and culture extends beyond the day-to-day. He has served on the board of directors for the Colorado-Wyoming Association of Museum and Mountain Plains Museum Association. He is currently the program committee chair for MPMA's annual meeting. He is also the president of the Museum of Casper organization. John is also an avid podcaster, serving as a co-host and technical specialist for the M-Files Museum podcast and Buffalo Tales Stories from the Wyoming History. In today's presentation, John will focus on short biographies of several Wyomingites, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, native and transplants, who have made an impact within the state of Wyoming or elsewhere. Their impact might have been through their military service or professional contributions. So I'd like to offer a warm virtual welcome to John.
Thank you very much. Greetings from Casper, Wyoming. I'm currently speaking to you from 5,100 feet above sea level, and it is a very warm August day here in Casper. But regardless, I'd like to appreciate the invitation to speak with you today. And our program is going to be on famous Wyoming veterans. Now, this is a program that is very central to our mission at one of our museum facilities, the Wyoming Veterans Memorial Museum, where we take a great interest in highlighting the lives and impact of a wide range of veterans. We feel that preserving and sharing these stories is essential for people to understand the historic context of the military in its relationship to the state of Wyoming. These men and women, I should make a note, we're always trying, we have a smaller pool of female veterans, and unfortunately I wasn't able to get one that into this presentation, but we're trying, that's something that we are always working to find. But these men and women have and continue to make impacts not only in their military service, but in their personal lives and business lives in both Wyoming and elsewhere. The format of this presentation is a series of short biographies where I'll introduce some of these people. Some you know or might know, most of them you probably don't, unless you're familiar with certain aspects of Western history or Western culture or Wyoming history. But to kick things off, there's a quote that I like to include with this presentation, which is, not everybody can be famous, but everybody can be great, because greatness is determined by service. And I think that encapsulates what we're trying to do with not only preserving, but also sharing the service and life histories of various Wyoming veterans. These individuals are great because of the service that they have provided both to our nation and to their communities in one way, shape, or form. So to sort of piggyback on that before we get in, as I've said, I think our mission here is to note that service continues well after the uniformed or military service of the veteran's life has ended. Most veterans today only serve about 6.5 years in uniform service before they return to their civilian lives. This is a little bit actually longer than it was when compulsory military service, the draft, was in operation. At that point in time, it was typically 4 to 5 years. So up until the 1970s, most men in the United States had served in some fashion due to compulsory military service. So we see a lot of veterans, especially through the Vietnam era. Wyoming is pretty special. We are a large, small state. We are the 10th largest in area in the United States, but we have the smallest population of any of the states or even some of the territories. At last count, our population here in Wyoming was just over 570,000 people. When you put that into the 10th largest state in the country, it's a pretty sparse place. Our largest and most populous county only has about 110 or 120,000 people living in it. But regardless, our state has has a very large veterans population. About 10% of our state has had military service in one way, shape, or form. And beyond that, the connections, the veterans connected population, people whose parents, uncles, aunts, cousins, immediate family members with direct military service is incredibly high. So it's something that people in Wyoming are very proud of, and something that has helped our museum grow over the last 25 odd years. So we'll begin with who I like to call our first key veteran, and that's the explorer, John Colter. John Colter was the first American and veteran to visit the state of Wyoming, well before the idea of the state of Wyoming was even a thing. He was born in Stewart's Draft, Virginia, about 1770. We're not quite sure when. He lived his life mostly on what was then the western frontier of the United States, and was eventually recruited by Captain Meriwether Lewis to serve in the Corps of Discovery expedition to the Pacific coast. He and several other men impressed Lewis with their ability to operate sort of at the fringes of the map, out into the frontier. The Corps of Discovery, the Lewis and Clark expedition, was a special access division of the United States Army, and most of the men who were on the expedition were enlisted soldiers within the Army. Colter himself was a private in the United States Army and served with distinction, being highly trusted by both Lewis and Clark, and even named in letters written by President Thomas Jefferson. So he was, why not I say, a key member. He was a stalwart of the expedition and someone that the leadership could trust very heavily. Colter made the trip with the expedition to the Pacific coast and then back. And on the return leg, was discharged at his request 2 months early so that he could assist a group of trappers and traders that they met in North Dakota that were heading back up to the Missouri River. So he left to serve as a guide for this commercial expedition. And he remained in Wyoming or Montana for a couple of years. And it's at this point, we suspect in the winter of 1807 to 1808, he ventured into the northern portion of what is now Yellowstone National Park. He actually would report later on of the hydrographical or hydrological features that he found: the geysers, the boiling mud pots, the hot water pools that are encountered seen by numerous tourists today. But he would report this back to authorities in Missouri and in the rest of the United States, and his reports were discounted. No one could believe what he was reporting because it was like nothing, nowhere else on Earth. And it became a running tall tale, maybe the first Western tall tale from Wyoming, with Yellowstone being nicknamed Colter's Hell as a result. Although later mountain men and explorers would corroborate his stories. Colter would return to Missouri about 1810 and would take up farming until his death, which, depending on the reports, either took place in 1812 or 1813. The image that I have here is a bust that is at a small museum at Cody, Wyoming, that features Coulter. There's no known images or paintings of him that are known to exist. So this is the best representation we have. But as the explorer, John Coulter is our first veteran and our first American to come into what would be modern day Wyoming. He wasn't the last. Our statesman was Francis Emery Warren. He is the namesake for F.E. Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne, our state capital. He was born in Hillsdale, Massachusetts in 1844 and served in the Massachusetts Volunteers during the Civil War. He served with distinction, being discharged as a corporal at the end of the war, and received the Medal of Honor for actions taken at the Battle of Port Hudson, Louisiana. After the Civil War ended, he began looking to the west, arriving in Wyoming Wyoming Territory in 1868, settling in the Cheyenne area, at that point the territorial capital and now our state capital. While in the Cheyenne area, he was involved in a number of different commercial ventures, real estate, general business, and cattle ranching, which at that time was a very profitable business that drew capital from across the globe. He also began, like many important men of that era, became involved in municipal and territorial government. He served in the municipal government in Cheyenne and was later appointed to the territorial council. He is notable because he is the last territorial governor of Wyoming, appointed by President William Henry Harrison in 1889 or so. He was there when Wyoming received its statehood in 1890 and was actually elected the first governor of the state. So he was our last territorial governor and our first state governor. However, he only served as governor for about a month before he resigned to take up one of the open Senate seats for Wyoming. It's important to note that at the time of his appointment to the Senate, the state senates in the various states elected senators. It wasn't, as it is now, a direct election from the people, but it was an election of the state legislatures. Warren would serve in the United States Senate for 36 years and was one of the longest serving U.S. senators upon his death in 1929. An interesting connection with Warren is actually his son-in-law. His son-in-law was General John J. Pershing, the general and commanding officer of the American Expeditionary Force during World War I. Pershing married Warren's daughter, and it should be noted that at that time that he was appointed as the AEF's commanding officer, Warren held a important seat on the Military Appropriations or Military Affairs Committee in the Senate, and was a strong advocate for his son-in-law. So that's our statesman, Francis E. Warren. We would also have veterans that served within the judiciary, among other things. John Joseph Hickey was arguably one of the most important judicial officers to come from Wyoming, although he served in other roles. He was born in Rawlins, Wyoming, which is in south central Wyoming, in August of 1911. He would attend the University of Wyoming and the University of Wyoming's law school before returning to his hometown to serve in the municipal government and as his county's attorney. Like many of his generation, he joined the U.S. Army after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, with his initial appointment being in the Army Infantry. He served with distinction and was recognized for his educational level, So after 3.5 years of service, he was discharged from the Army with the rank of captain. Later, after his return to the Cowboy State, he was appointed the U.S. Attorney for the District of Wyoming by Harry Truman. And he served there for a few years before being elected as Wyoming's 24th governor in 1958. It's interesting to note that Hickey was actually the first Wyoming governor born within the 20th century. Now, at this point, even though I call him the judge, Joe Hickey decided to do something a little unorthodox. After 2 years in the governor's mansion, he appointed himself to one of the open Senate seats for Wyoming. So he resigned and became a senator for Wyoming, which is an odd move, but it happened. And served in the Senate for 2 years before losing out in the general election in 1962. However, he was nominated for the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals by President Lyndon B. Johnson in 1966 and would continue to serve in that position until his death in 1970. But Hickey remains one of our most notable members of the judiciary, both within the state and at the federal level. Now, not all Wyoming veterans were born in either the territory of Wyoming or the state of Wyoming. Edward L. Baker was born in Dakota Territory, although where he was born is well within our state's borders today. Baker was born at Fort Laramie, the same Fort Laramie that was a major stopping off point along the westward trails, Oregon, California, Utah. In 1865, he was the son of a French father and an African-American mother. He lived along the plains in his youth, but eventually joined the U.S. Army at age 16, enlisting in the 9th U.S. Cavalry Regiment, the Buffalo Soldiers. His first appointment was as a musician or a trumpeter, so he would help signal formations and whatnot within his company. After a successful tour of service, he re-enlisted in the Army in 1887, but this time with the 10th U.S. Cavalry, again, another Buffalo Soldiers unit, and was a remarkable soldier. He rose to the rank of Regimental Sergeant Major within the 10th Cavalry, which was the highest enlisted rank within the regiment. So he held the trust and respect of the commissioned officers of the whole regiment. While serving in the 10th Cavalry, he was deployed to Cuba during the Spanish-American War and fought alongside other units during the Battle of the San Juan Heights, most notably the 1st United States Volunteer Cavalry, Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders. And the 10th Cavalry was there alongside the Rough Riders as they made their charge up Kettle Hill, mistakenly called San Juan Hill, but it's Kettle Hill, during the conflict. It was also in Cuba that Baker distinguished himself for actions saving a comrade from drowning while under fire from the enemy. And those actions resulted in receiving the Medal of Honor, which was awarded to him in 1902. Later on, Baker would continue to serve with other units, including the Filipino Scouts, the 10th Volunteer Infantry, and the 49th Volunteer Infantry, which you can see he's dressed in that regiment's insignia in the image. And while with the 49th, he received an officer's commission. He retired as a captain in the United States Army in 1909 with over 27 years of military service. And it's hard to believe that most people in Wyoming have never heard of Edward Baker, despite his trailblazing service as an African-American soldier in the United States in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. But we have other veterans that are as interesting and sometimes less known. One of these is our archaeologist, Dr. George Frizen. Uh, Dr. Frizen, who is known popularly as Doc to his students, was the man who wrote the book on archaeology in Wyoming and on the High Plains. His book, Prehistoric Hunters of the High Plains, is a required reading for anyone wanting to work in archaeology here in Wyoming, Nebraska, Montana, even up into parts of the southern Canada. He was born in the small town of Worland, Wyoming, in November of 1924. His family owned a cattle ranch near an even smaller town called Ten Sleep, which is at the foot of the Bighorn Mountains. It was there, along in the shadow of the Bighorns, that Frizen began to discover Native American artifacts that had been left in that area as a child, years earlier, and that really sparked something in him. Again, he went off to serve in the Second World War, traveling to the South Pacific and serving in the United States Navy for several years before his discharge in 1946. His love of archaeology actually brought him back to change his occupation. After the war, he returned to running the ranch, but continued his interest in archaeology. He was a very prominent avocational archaeologist and an active member of the Wyoming Archaeological Society. But he was told after a while that if he wanted to pursue that in any kind of definite form, he needed to get a college education and to pursue that through academics. So at age 37 in 1962, he enrolled or re-enrolled in the University of Wyoming to study anthropology and archaeology. He was the oldest student in his class, but was very enthusiastic on the subject. He earned his degree in a few years and then attended and received advanced degrees from the University of Michigan, a master's and a PhD, before returning to Wyoming in 1968. At that point, he became the first Wyoming state archaeologist and helped set up the anthropology department at the University of Wyoming. The Frizen Institute, named after him, is a strong component of that department to this day, focusing on the archaeology of the Rocky Mountain West. Frizen was a notable experimental archaeologist. He liked to replicate the tools and techniques of previous peoples. And in the image you see on the screen, he's demonstrating a atlatl, which is a type of it's a throwing spear or dart thrown by another stick. And that was something very commonly found across the United States before for several thousand years. I'd have to go look at the specific dates. But he would also have other experiments, like there's a famous incident where a Asian elephant, a circus elephant, passed away to natural causes in the university town there in Laramie. And after some deals, Dr. Frizen got the chance to try and use stone tools to butcher parts of the elephant to see if a stone tool could butcher something like a mammoth. And the story of Margie the elephant is told repeatedly by undergraduates and graduate students at the university. My first job, I got a chance to see a couple pieces of Margie in my role at the archaeological repository. But Doc Frizen would go on to explore other parts of the world, traveling to Europe, Russia, and other places, and Africa, to test out different techniques to see if what the archaeologists thought actually was true. He retired in the late 1990s and was elected to the National Academy of Sciences. To this day, he is the only member of the National Academy of Sciences from Wyoming. and was the only one at on the university's faculty, either as a full professor or as an emeritus member, for many years. And he passed away, sadly, in 2020. I had the opportunity to meet him as an undergraduate, which was quite interesting. He was the old man, but very knowledgeable about anything about archaeology in Wyoming. So he was a very interesting man. But other parts of the sciences have a veteran's impact. Samuel H. Knight, or Doc Knight, as he was commonly called, was Mr. Geology of Wyoming. He was born in July of 1892 to parents that would have a remarkable impact on the University of Wyoming. His father, Wilbur, was one of the first geology professors at UW, and his mother, Emma, would become what was then called the Dean of Women, when there was a separate Dean of Men and Dean of Women in their Student Affairs division. He attended, Doc Knight first attended UW to get his undergraduate before going off to Columbia to receive advanced training in geology, completing his PhD there. Afterwards, he graduated about the time the First World War was breaking out, and he found a position in U.S. Army intelligence doing terrain studies under one of his mentors from Columbia. It's unclear if he was actually deployed to Europe or if he remained stateside during the conflict. But upon his discharge, he was discharged at the rank of first lieutenant, but made his way back to Wyoming. He would teach between 1919 and 1963, and during that period of time, about 10,000 students passed through his classroom. He was well known for his very colorful chalk drawings of geological features and topography that he would make himself. And he also had the ability to draw a perfect circle using his arm as a fulcrum. So he would stand at a chalkboard facing the class, and he would hold a piece of chalk in his hand behind, rested in the small of his back, and then he could whip his arm around in a motion to draw that circle. My dad had him as a student many years ago, and can still remember Doc Knight and his classes. Dr. Knight also served as a Wyoming State geologist from 1933 to 1940. And as I said, he is still revered today as Mr. Geology of Wyoming. I've actually been able to find some videos of him later in his career that were transcribed and uploaded to YouTube. And so you can find him on YouTube today teaching classes on Wyoming geography, or geology, excuse me. The last sort of person also taught at the University of Wyoming, more in the humanities than the sciences, was Dr. Taft Alfred Larson, or T.A. Larson. If Doc Knight was Mr. Geology of Wyoming, Dr. Larson was Mr. History of Wyoming. He was born in eastern Nebraska, small town of Wakefield, in 1910. His first experience in Wyoming was actually fixing a flat tire somewhere along the southern tier of the state, along the old Lincoln Highway, when he and some of his fellows at the University of Colorado were trying to make their way to Salt Lake City to watch the UC Buffaloes in a football game, and they had to fix a flat tire. He was originally trained to be a medieval English historian, and that's what he received his master's and his PhD in from the University of Illinois. But he came out to Wyoming in 1936 on a one-year teaching contract, and after a brief interruption, he came back and made his life here in the High Plains. One of his assignments was to teach a class, or to create a class in Wyoming history. And that's what became really his stock and trade for the next almost 40 years. He did take a brief sabbatical in 1943 to 46 during the war, where he joined the United States Navy and was assigned to Great Lakes Naval Station in Illinois, where he served as a historian and author. where he wrote a history of the Great Lakes Station. Somewhere between 16,000, 17,000 students passed through his classrooms between 1938 and 1975, learning about Wyoming history. His books, including History of Wyoming, second edition, are the gold standard for the state's history even today. After his retirement in the mid-70s, Dr. Larson would go on to serve 4 terms in the Wyoming State Legislature. His daughter was actually my undergraduate advisor at the university when I was in the anthropology department, and she was the one who helped encourage me to pursue a degree in history, telling me anecdotes about her father's time teaching history at Wyoming. But we have some other interesting veterans beyond those that worked in education. We have some movie stars. One of these was Colonel Tim McCoy. Now, McCoy was might not be well known today, but in his era, he was one of the most famous Western cowboys. He was originally from Saginaw, Michigan, but came west after being inspired by Buffalo Bill Cody. He chose Wyoming after a chance meeting with a horse dealer in Omaha, Nebraska. But he came to Wyoming to work ranches and then also to homestead. He joined the Wyoming National Guard right before the First World War, and in 1919 was actually appointed as the state's adjutant general, the highest enlisted officer, reporting directly to the governor. He served 2 years as the adjutant general before he went on to work in the motion picture industry. Between 1924 and 1965, he was a movie and TV actor with 95 credits to his name. He would also try and pursue a political career, but ultimately that failed on him. He did serve briefly in World War II as a liaison officer for the Army Air Forces. Besides the arts, we also have a painter. Harry Jackson was a combat artist in World War II that went on to be one of the most famous Western artists with an interest in Wyoming. He was born in Chicago in 1924, but fell in love with Wyoming and cowboys as a child and young adult. He was actually inspired to come to the state in 1937 after reading an article in Life magazine. He was wounded twice in combat in World War II at Tarawa and Saipan that left him with lasting impacts and post-traumatic stress disorder. In the 1950s, he was mentored by Jackson Pollock, also a Wyoming native, before going on to work in Europe for several years and then ultimately coming back to Wyoming in the 1970s. He's best known for his paintings of Wyoming and scenes of the West, but also worked in abstract art during his period with Jackson Pollock. His collections are held in places like the Smithsonian Institution. The Vatican owns several of his pieces, the Denver Art Museum, and numerous institutions here in the Cowboy State, including the Buffalo Bill Center of the West, the Nicolaus Art Museum here in Casper, and the University of Wyoming's Art Museum. He was actually the youngest combat artist in the Marine Corps during World War II at the age of 20. But perhaps our most famous veteran, and the one that most people are familiar with, is Colonel William F. Cody, Buffalo Bill himself. A Iowan by birth, he has been adopted by Wyoming due to his longstanding connections and love of the state. Now, he was known for his inventiveness and exaggeration, but he came to Wyoming sometime during the 1870s. During the Civil War, at age 17, he joined the 7th Kansas Cavalry, serving for 2 years. Later on, he served as a civilian scout for the United States Army during the Plains Indian Wars, and received the Medal of Honor in 1872, although this was kind of controversial because at the time he was a civilian. In 1917, the Army revoked his Medal of Honor due to his civilian status, and it took 72 years before the family and the efforts of Wyoming Senator Alan Simpson got the medal restored to him. His greatest achievement was establishing Buffalo Bill's Wild West in 1883, which toured the world, including 8 tours of Europe before closing in 1906. He's best known for a command performance before Queen Victoria during her Golden Jubilee, and also an extended performance at or run at the 1893 World Columbian Exhibition in Chicago, Illinois. Within the state of Wyoming, Cody's best known for his establishment of the town of Cody, Wyoming. But he also was had business interests in places like Sheridan and also Cheyenne. Cody died in 1917 in Denver, where he's buried, which has also brought up a rivalry of sorts between Wyoming and our neighbors to the south. Rumors persist that Cody was secretly buried in Wyoming, but there's no proof to that. There's also the incident in 1948 when members of the American Legion post in Cody offered a $10,000 reward to anyone who could return Cody's body to Wyoming, prompting their brethren in the Denver area to post a round-the-clock guard on the gravesite and actually pour a large slab of concrete over it to prevent any grave robbing. But Cody is very much a loved and beloved and revered figure here within the Cowboy State. The sort of to close things, we have another quote for you, which is, "Our debt to the heroic men and valiant women in the service of our country can never be repaid. They have earned our undying gratitude." And that's by Harry Truman, who, besides serving as the commander-in-chief, also was a World War I veteran, serving in the field artillery, and also he retired a colonel in the Missouri National Guard. So someone who had a long-standing respect for military service and the impact that veterans play on all aspects of our lives. So with that, I know I've sort of might have breezed through a little of those, but I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Okay, class, I'll open the floor. If you have a question, please unmute your microphone, but leave your camera off and ask the question.
Yeah, I have a question regarding actually all of these individuals. Do you have links to them on a website or something where they can be researched for genealogical purposes?
Unfortunately, no. However, a lot of these individuals, if you put their name into Google, you can find information about them. Yeah,
Wikipedia has information for a number of them.
Yeah, the Albany County Historical Society has good information on people like Dr. T.A. Larson. Another place to look for is wyohistory.org, which is a nonprofit that is a encyclopedia of Wyoming history. And you'll find several of these individuals listed on wyohistory.org.
Okay. And I was actually looking at the Wikipedia for, actually it wasn't Wikipedia, I think it was WikiTree for Wild Bill Cody. And it doesn't mention his military service.
I think he was considered a wagoneer while he was in the Kansas regiment, but it's something that we've looked into because there have been some issues as to whether or not he actually served or not.
You know what? I scrolled down just a little bit further and there it is. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Randall from Florida, did you want to talk about your third grandfather?
Just it's a little off the gentleman's talk here regarding the military. My third great grandfather, which was Harrison Preston Arnold, along with Wild Bill Cody, founded Old Cody City, Wyoming. He's one of the, and you'll
Mhm.
see the placards. I am a direct, he is my direct grandfather through my grandmother. And I thought, and I share this with, it's a very interesting history that Harrison has and what he did for the state, and or should I say the territorial of Wyoming.
Mhm.
And he also died in the territorial and was shipped back to New York State for his burial in the family plot. So,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
we have a
very
lot of
interesting.
stuff with Wild Bill Cody.
Hmm.
Now, I noticed as you were listing off the names of the people, some of these names are pretty old American names, like Warren, Baker, Knight. These are Larson, McCoy. These are all pretty old names. Um, I'm not going to ask because I know you're not a genealogist, but I'm not going to ask about their families going back in time. But what about their descendants coming forward in time? Um, are there like, like I know in genealogy, a lot of famous people, their homes are preserved, their papers are preserved, um, their homes, become landmarks. Do any of these people that you just shared with us have that benefit? I would assume the governors do, because most governor papers are usually
Hmm.
put in an archive at a university in the state or thereabouts.
Yeah, the papers for like Dr. Knight, Dr. Larson are available at the University of Wyoming, at least in part or pieces. Um, with Governor Warren, I believe I'm not sure if the Wyoming State Archives have his papers or if they're stored somewhere else. But you can find a lot of those resources through the American Heritage Center, which is the research branch of the University of Wyoming Libraries. Um, they're they were originally called the Western History Annex, but they are a full service archive that focuses on Wyoming history and the history of the University of Wyoming. With some of the other individuals, like with Buffalo Bill Cody, obviously there's the Buffalo Bill Center of the West in Cody, which was has its roots in 1917, just immediately following Cody's death. And they have the McCracken Research Library that contains a large volume of material on Cody's life, as well as Buffalo Bill's Wild West. Some of the other individuals, not so much. With Edward Baker, obviously his records you could request from the probably National Archives. I think he's right before the cutoff before you can get things from the National Personnel Records Center. But some of the other individuals, like with Dr. Knight and others, you might be able to request from the MPRC.
And I don't suppose you know what happened to their descendants. Are their descendants still in Wyoming?
Some, yes. Like I know, for example, like Dr. Larson, his daughter, who is also a PhD, she has a PhD in anthropology, Mary Lou Larson. Actually, I think she passed away only a few years ago. I'm not sure if her kids live in the state or not, but some of the descendants I think still do. But with Wyoming, it's kind of hard. Even though we're a small town with very long streets, opportunities here can be few and far between. So a lot of people do leave to seek other opportunities.
And once again, I know you're not a genealogist, and you just listed quite a few places that I think are excellent sources for people in my class to go research their Wyoming ancestors. But are there any other genealogical sources that you can think of offhand to share with the class?
Um, obviously like Wyoming State Archives, one of the biggest projects that they have is called it's the Wyoming Newspaper Project. It's the name has changed, but it's a joint project between the Wyoming State Archives and the Wyoming State Library. It is a digitally accessible archive of Wyoming newspapers, searchable by keyword. So if you want it's available up through the mid 1920s with the cutoff in copyright. but the publicly accessible newspapers are available from most of the state. It's a little bit more user friendly than newspapers.com. I think newspapers.com only has, I think, 4 or maybe 5 papers from the state in their holdings. There are many, many more, and they are have been scanned with enough resolution that OCR is available on those, so you can do keyword searches. And they've had that for 12 years now. We had it when I was in graduate school, and it was fantastic. It sped up research tenfold. Beyond that, some of the counties will, like Park County has a county archive with a searchable database. Other locations like Sheridan or Rollins will have museums or libraries that have local record rooms that they can help you with. So really look at your county level museums and libraries to see what resources are available there. It's different depending on which county you go to. University of Wyoming's American Heritage Center is definitely a location. It has a lot of Wyoming and University of Wyoming documentation, but then it has some really strange stuff too. We have, for any comic book fans, the papers of Stan Lee are at the University of Wyoming, like from Marvel Comics. No idea why he chose Wyoming, but that's where that's the repository that we have. So also in the holdings at the American Heritage Center are the Husband E. Kimmel papers. Admiral Kimmel was the Pacific Fleet commander at the time of Pearl Harbor. So those are also at the University of Wyoming. So it's an interesting place that has some really cool documents if you got the time to look.
Wonderful. Let's see here. I think I have a couple more questions here. Hold on. Oh, you had mentioned homesteading. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So the homesteading process was established in 1862. It was actually signed, or 63, excuse me. It was signed the same week as the Morrill Land Grant College Act and the Pacific Railway Act. All 3 of these acts were instrumental in development of the West. But the Homesteading Act provided free land to individuals, provided that they meet certain requirements and that they improve the land to some degree. The homesteading was available in one shape or form until about 1976, although that later portion was only in the state of Alaska. Most in the continental United States, homesteading ended about 1935 with the passage of the Taylor Grazing Act that created the Bureau of Land Management. But if you're interested in getting information about homesteading records, the BLM General Land Office records are available online and searchable. I think you can find them through Homestead National Monument, their webpage. They're based out of Nebraska. But if you're interested, you can search by state, you can search by keyword or name, and you can get the location of that homestead and also scans of some of the homestead documents. So you can find out who served as witnesses to when they were proving up on the land. So the BLM GLO database is very interesting. Is a good source for information.
Great. Okay. And let's see here. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah. I think we covered all the questions I wrote down. I'm going to open the floor up again to the class. Class, any questions for John? Go ahead and unmute your microphone. Okay, well, John, it looks like you've answered everyone's questions. I really appreciate it. I actually do have some ancestors from Wyoming, so the wonderful tips that you gave me, hopefully I will be able to follow up in the next few weeks. I really appreciate it.
Not a problem.
So with that, if there's no other questions, I'll say thank you very much. Oh, and John, thank you for allowing us to record. I really appreciate it. It might take a couple weeks for our marketing department to get it up on our YouTube channel.
Not a problem. Happy to be a part of your class for today.
Well, thank you so much, and you have a wonderful weekend. And I'll
All
go
right,
ahead
thank
and
you.
stop the recording.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.